Episode 1, Ensign and Ling Yue's first meeting. Ensign rode a small tram on the seaside road. She was a courier. Then Ling Yue's car sprinted past and almost hit Ensign. Ensign looked disdainful and complained about how this person drove. This, subconsciously remembered, lived with the license plate number of Ling Yue, but at this time Ensign didn't know that this was Ling Yue. This was the first encounter between Ensign and Ling Yue. Ensign came to a company to send flowers. At the door of the company, when she saw the car that had just quit and collided with her, she secretly thought that the road was narrow. That's right, this is Ling Yue's company. He was in a meeting at this time. Not only is he highly educated, but also very business-minded. He can always find out the small and subtle mistakes of the employees during the meeting. He can send the flowers to the front desk with peace of mind. Just when Mr. Ling came out after the meeting, the secretary handed the flowers to Mr. Ling. Telling him that this was the flower for his mother's grave sweeping, Mr. Ling took the flower and took the elevator down with Ensign. Ensign realized that this flower was the bouquet she had just sent. In the elevator, Ensign could only see the back of Mr. Ling's head. At this moment, the elevator was reporting the news of a foreign elevator accident. The male protagonist had delusion of victimization and seemed calm, but in fact he had already begun to fantasize that he was killed in the elevator. Then Ling Yue drove to the cemetery, and Ensign returned to the courier station. Ensign changed shifts with other employees, and had to work late. The male protagonist discovered that there was a tracking vehicle behind on the road and immediately realized that it was wrong, and then changed the route. It turned out that it was the eldest brother of the Ling family. As the second child of the family, Ling Yue was an adopted son and was often squeezed out by the boss, and the boss was unlearned and unskilled but wanted to put Ling Yue in a dangerous place. The third child often inquired about Ling Yue's second child, but every time he was scolded by his elder brother. The two people who followed Ling Yue were thrown off and called Ling Peishin. He was grumpy and told them that they had to chase Ling Yue, and then a pair of them. The look of unlearning and incompetence started to shake the vibrato. At this moment, Ling Yue was galloping on the road around the sea, driving faster and faster, but he quickly discovered something was wrong. The brakes failed, and he couldn't stop at all. At this moment, a large truck in front came and Ling Yue drove into the sea, following him. When the two of them happened to see this scene, they called their eldest brother. The eldest and third brother hurriedly went home to inform their parents. His father fainted as soon as he heard the news. It rained heavily in the evening, and Ensign finished working overtime and the battery car was also driving on the road around the sea. At this time, Ling Yue crawled out of the sea and just walked onto the highway. Ensign rode the battery car and hit Ling Yue when the road slipped. Ensign took him to the hospital. Ling Yue woke up as soon as he arrived at the hospital. Ensign asked Ensign anxiously about his health and whether there was any discomfort, but Ling Yue saw the two following him come to the hospital to look for him, and he pulled Ensign over to block him. He happened to be walking by and bumped Ensign, and the two kissed him. Ensign reacted and gave Ling Yue a slap. It was with this one that Ling Yue fell into a coma again. After the doctor finished the operation, Ling Yue just woke up and saw Ensign by the bed, so he asked her for a mobile phone, and Ensign asked him what he wanted the phone to do. Ling Yue explained to the police. This frightened Ensign and begged him to be okay. Discuss, but don't call the police. Ling Yue asked him who he was. Ensign realized that Ling Yue had lost his memory, so he asked the doctor. The doctor explained that all the injuries from the fall were skin trauma. Maybe it was the external force that caused the slight concussion and the transient. Ensign realized that it might be caused by the slap she had just slapped, so she paid him medical bills. In addition, Ensign couldn't afford the surgery fee, so she didn't let Ling Yue be hospitalized. However, Ling Yue calculated compensation for a total of 100,000 yuan, and Ensign was dumbfounded. After paying the surgery fee, there was only more than 1,000 yuan left on her body. By coincidence, the landlord called to increase the rent, so Ensign begged Ling Yue to owe the money first and let him live in his own home. She took care of her, Ling Yue agreed, and Ling Yue lived in Anshin's home. But after Ling Yue lived there, Ensign caused a lot of trouble, and the two of them fought and quarreled. Every time Ling Yue made compensation, Ensign would write it down and count it on Ling Yue's head. Although Ling Yue had amnesia, his knowledge and this style were still there, and in this way, the two of them had more stories to happen.